some of the tools that you can start learning to develop for mixed reality. There is a great selection of tools. One of the very popular one is Unity Engine. It has a great UI which allows you to drag and drop objects or assets and create your applications right at the UI level. But if you want to add more behavior to it, you can create some scripts with C# in Visual Studio and debug your application there as well. And we have an emulator for HoloLens that you can use directly from Visual Studio. Another great tool that we are supporting now is Unreal Engine, and it's a very popular tool among designers. And if you're developing for the web, we have multiple choice. Babylon.js is a great library which has amazing examples and a playground that you can start playing with. 3.js and A-Frame are two other very popular libraries that you can start playing today. You can choose from any of these tools to get started with mixed reality.
So welcome all in this stream, and a special welcome to Carl Rand from Rendeavor, who's going to talk about boosting mental wellness of seniors. I'm really curious what you're going to talk about. So please, the floor is yours.
Awesome, thank you. All right, hello everyone, and thank you so much for joining me today. As he said, my name is Kyle Rand. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Rendeavor, which is a company that's focused on reducing social isolation through the power of virtual reality. We've been around since 2016 and have seen both the senior living and VR industry evolve year over year, especially over the past 2 years. Now, I'm sure I'm not alone in saying the past year and a half really stands out for me. It's a period of time that I'm never really going to forget. Broadly in life, of course, but really within the context of technology-driven service for older adults. I'm sure I'm not alone in feeling that the future of VR has really never looked brighter. And I'm thrilled to talk about what we've been working on and the impact we've seen within the older adult demographic specifically. All things that are coming together in a really beautiful way. I'm confident the future of the aging process is going to radically change with everything that VR is offering today and is going to be offering in the future. And I'll explain why over the course of this session. Now, before I jump into the meat of the presentation, I want to share a bit about me and my personal background. So I was born and raised in upstate New York here in the US and have spent most of my life working with seniors. On my mom's side, I have nearly 30 cousins spread across 7 pairs of aunts and uncles, but I was the only grandchild who was blessed to have my grandmother present for my birth. So naturally, we always shared a special connection. So when she passed away suddenly at the beginning of my college career, it rocked me pretty heavily. I ended up working in a research lab that was focused on cognitive decline in the aging population. And I spent much of my lab time working with older adults on cognitive experiments that were honestly pretty awfully designed. And this is when I truly learned the importance of designing good user experience when you're building products for this aging demographic. And then right around the time that I was getting ready to graduate from college, my other grandmother, seen here, was diagnosed with her second round of cancer, which triggered a pretty tough and lengthy decision-making process for my family in trying to find the best place for her to age with care, but also to age with dignity. We ultimately decided to move her into a senior living community, and this was a community where she had been previously attending the day program. And as a family, we had the highest hopes that we were going to be giving her a good quality of life as well as a good quality of care. But unfortunately, she became super lonely and disconnected from the life that she loved, one that, as you can see, was spent at her home overlooking one of the Finger Lakes or swimming in the pool with her grandchildren. And she declined pretty quickly. It was unfortunately only a few months before we lost her. Now, I share all of this with you to help understand the basis of the empathy that has led me down this career path. When we started digging into the data behind social isolation, which is what my grandmother experienced, we knew there was an opportunity to take a fresh approach to engagement within the aging population. And VR was the first tool that we turned to, and found some pretty immediate signs of success that have brought us where we are today, here 5 years later. Our endeavor, our mission is to overcome social isolation through the power of virtual reality and positive shared experiences. So as a result, we spent the past 4.5 years building a platform that utilizes VR to remove the very concept of physical barriers from the older adult resident experience, allowing every senior to remain a part of the world and the social circles that exist beyond the four walls of the community that they end up in. Now, this all started due to prevalence of stories like that of my grandmother's. But before we get into the details about what exactly it is that we do with this demographic, I want to shed some light on something that we need to continue to work on as a VR community. Now, this is a slide that I've kept in my presentations for a few years, and I'll never really forget learning about the VR industry in the early days of Rendeavor and noticing how singularly minded all of the marketing was. If you search for VR, even on Google today, you'll notice that while the hardware has changed from this screenshot, the makeup of the search results is still very much the same. You see kids, you see teens, you see people wearing headsets while perched on ledges of mountaintops, which obviously I don't recommend for anybody, let alone the seniors that we work with. It's very normalized towards what modern marketing thinks of as exciting, right? Young people who are having fun. Luckily, the VR industry as a whole, we're moving towards broader scale outreach today. We're not the only company that works with a demographic like this. And there are a few companies who have helped really bring this concept of VR for good into the spotlight through working with demographics who can really be positively impacted through this technology. And we're noticing that the greater tech and media communities have been responding really positively to what it is that we're putting out. Now, this has been in part due to the fact of reactions of these demographics that we work with. And as we get ready to talk about social isolation and what we do at Rendeavor and the power of virtual reality for this demographic, I want to share one of my favorite stories, which is the story of Mickey. So early on, as we were just starting to find success in this industry, we did a demo at a Maplewood senior living community here in Connecticut in the United States. The demo was going pretty fantastically well. We had dozens of residents in the room. They were all sitting in a circle and they were passing around the headsets, smiles and laughter just ringing throughout the halls. And then about halfway in, the staff wheeled in a woman named Mickey. And her caregiver just comes running over to me and it's just like, I need to tell you her story. So apparently, for years, Mickey was the most outgoing and friendly person in the community. She knew everyone's name. She was a regular at all community events. She always had a smile on her face, and it was a smile that lit up the room. And then she was diagnosed with early stage dementia, and they moved her upstairs into the locked memory care unit. One of her first symptoms was expressive aphasia, and it hit her hard. She went from being this boisterous personality, this member of the community, to suddenly being robbed of her very ability to communicate. And her silence clearly left a void in the community. The caregiver looked at me and he pleaded, I just want to see her smile again. I want to hear her laugh again. So we put our heads together and decided the best option was to bring her into a room full of golden retriever puppies. And her reaction, I think, speaks for itself.
Mickey, give it a kiss.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Give it a kiss, Mickey.
Oh, unbelievable. Oh, beautiful. I didn't know you can't. Oh, God.
I try to shoot this teeth every once in a while so we know what they're looking at.
There it goes, Mickey. It took off.
Oh, here's another one.
Oh, here comes another one, Mickey. It's coming.
This is absolutely unbelievable. Oh, look at that. Oh,
Thank you very much.
Now, as you can see, she lit up, right? It was like the light just turned back on. And more importantly, I hope you heard, she got her voice back. Now, obviously, there was not a single dry eye in the room because they had all seen her beforehand. But my favorite part is that she actually followed us out of the building. And she was holding on to my co-founder's arm and explaining to us that we needed to use this technology in schools to help children learn. right? She was just in awe, and honestly, so were we. After all, we had just witnessed this incredible woman go from months of silence to casually pitching us business ideas after a single Rendeavor session. Then, when we checked back in 6 months later, she was still living in the memory care unit, but she was also still talking. Through that Rendeavor session, she got her voice back, and the community got its same old boisterous Mickey back. Now, I'm not here to promise you that VR is going to do the same thing for every single older adult in the world. But after over 5 years of working with this technology within this population, I can promise you that there's some pretty amazing opportunities here. We hear incredible stories from our community partners pretty much every single day, stories that are just like Mickey's. And that's why this technology has become so widespread within the senior care industry today. It's not only super enjoyable to use, but when implemented correctly, it can create some real life magic. Now, I need to emphasize this point, especially here. It needs to be implemented correctly. You can't just run to your local Best Buy and grab a VR headset off the shelf and bring it to someone like Mickey and cross your fingers. That's not how any technology really works for this population. And trust me, we tried it in the very beginning just to prove ourselves right. And the results were anything but inspiring. The interface challenge in VR, it's too significant. So you really need to put staff in the driver's seat and allow them to lead the VR session, allow them to engage. That's what happened with Mickey. We were presented with someone who really needed to reconnect to joy, which would not have been accomplished if we were to just put her in a headset and say, okay, Mickey, go ahead and find something that makes you smile. Instead, we scrolled our library on our Rendeavor tablet and found something that made her smile, helped her put on the headset, and then we launched the experience. Hopefully you saw in the video, there was also a giant projector in the room the experience was cast to, so everyone could see what Mickey and the other residents were seeing, and one, share the joy of the experience, and two, make sure that they were aware of what was happening to properly engage and support Mickey. We'll get into this more later, but I want to backtrack a bit more and talk about the bigger picture. Because I'm sure at least some of you right now are wondering, like, what does any of this have to do with social isolation and mental well-being for seniors? I think it's important to reiterate the facts first. Social isolation is something that we've all experienced today, and I'm pretty positive that the empathy that this greater population has built during the pandemic will lead to more and more people caring for the loneliest in their communities. You'd say on a personal individual note, I'm super hopeful that Gen Z will show up for their grandparents and they'll start volunteering in senior living communities. And that volunteering will become more commonplace because that is, after all, where I got my start in this demographic. But in order for this to be a reality, society really needs to understand the impact of social isolation and why it's so detrimental for this demographic. So I'm going to run through some of these stats that we focus on when we discuss this with the rest of the world. First things first, loneliness is a quiet epidemic. About 20 to 43% of adults age 60 plus experience frequent or intense loneliness. Now, we know we have a problem. Lonely seniors are at an increased risk for a wide range of comorbidities. We're talking about a 30% increase in heart attack and stroke, a 50% increase in risk of dementia stemming from premature cognitive decline. We see increased risk of infections due to suppressed immune system, increased risk of diabetes, alongside increases in depression, anxiety, and even suicide. All of these come together to create a pretty scary picture. Research has shown that social isolation is as detrimental to one's health as smoking 15 cigarettes per day. Now, none of this data is new. A meta-analysis found that social isolation leads to a 30% increase in mortality rates for seniors. If you stop and think about it, that's even higher than the mortality rates of COVID-19, where global data has found a range that maxes out around 27% fatality rate for this demographic. And it's not only taking a toll on individuals, it's also taking a toll on the healthcare industry as a whole. A few years ago, social isolation was found to be associated with a $6.7 billion increase in Medicare spending each year here in the United States. That's almost $2,000 in direct Medicare costs per isolated senior. It's pretty substantial. Now, why do we believe that VR has the opportunity to help solve this problem? Since the beginning, Rendeavor's mission has been to overcome social isolation through the power of VR and shared positive experiences. As a company, we fundamentally believe that the foundation of all human connection is these shared positive experiences. So after months of careful research and planning, we developed a VR platform specifically designed to stimulate conversations, build trust, and help people develop meaningful relationships within aging communities. As we discussed, when we were getting started, VR had just gone through a pretty impressive growth phase, but it still wasn't widely used, and a fair number of people had had a negative experience with early devices. So there was a lot of market education that needed to happen. We knew it was going to take some time, and I would be lying if we never questioned whether or not it was going to take off. But the answer was in the magic like what we just saw with Mickey. When you look at the technology, there are a few things that make VR just unbeatable. First and most clearly, it's fully immersive. At its most basic level, when you put on a headset, you feel as if you're immediately transported to a different place. And that means that the entire world is all of a sudden open to you. On that note, it's limitless. Right? VR seriously allows you to go anywhere and do anything. And a good VR platform has a library of experiences that is all-encompassing. So at Rendeavor, we put staff in the mindset of acting as a sort of genie and making their residents' wishes come true. Our platform approach empowers them to deliver a seamless and magical experience. Do they have a resident that wants to go to the Eiffel Tower? Great, they can take them there in a snap. A resident wants to face their fears and jump out of a plane in a skydiving experience? You might be surprised, but people ask for that all the time, and we say, be our guest. Have a resident that wants to walk around the streets of the town that they grew up in? We put staff and community members in a position where they can do that and focus on sharing the stories that come up as they go through that reminiscence. The programming options we've created are honestly limitless here, but the true magic happens in the interactions caused by each piece of programming. The quick moments of laughter, of joy, of shared stories. These are what truly help people connect and build relationships to stave off loneliness. Now, I know some of you are probably thinking this sounds far-fetched, and we definitely dealt with a lot of hesitation when we got started, and rightfully so. We knew the industry needed to see the proof. So we worked with the world-renowned MIT Age Lab, and we found that after just 2 weeks of daily group Rendeavor sessions in VR, participants reported statistically significant decreases in depression scores and increases in multiple measures of social well-being. And most interestingly, people actually started to trust each other more. And when you think about the foundational elements of the human relationship, trust is significant. So for us, this was a really exciting result. The intersection of VR and social engagement now is one that's just full of possibility. And again, it was put to the ultimate test during the recent pandemic, when the senior living industry saw unprecedented stress, fear, burnout, and gut-wrenching sadness. COVID-19 spread like wildfire throughout the communities, and we saw firsthand the impact it had on residents, caregivers, and their family members. Across the pandemic, it's been easy to feel helpless at times, especially working in this industry, watching the crisis unfold, but not being able to actually walk into one of our community partners and volunteer or help or run a spontaneous VR session. It was pretty heartbreaking for all of us, I know for my company. So what we did was we went to work brainstorming programs and features that would allow us to help from afar using VR. And we learned a lot along the way, but namely that VR really is the perfect technology to battle loneliness and pandemic fatigue. As a company, we were strong proponents of shifting the nature of this big global conversation from social distancing to physical distancing. And that's where VR has been able to play a massive role. When it was nearly impossible to gather together in the same physical space, we had communities that were able to congregate virtually through a comprehensive set of features designed specifically to promote these kind of opportunities, this social engagement across physical distances. So I'm going to take you through the features that we focused on to help understand what's possible and what we focused on in building a sense of mental well-being and social well-being, even during a time of the year that was tough. First feature we launched was voice communication. We were well positioned to hit go on this right away because we had successfully been piloting long-distance shared VR experiences powered by voice communication through our NIH-funded study, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later. Since VR is fully immersive and you can't actually see anybody sitting around you, voice communication can serve as the means of social interaction in place of physical presence, without users really needing to adjust and experiencing a significant difference. It's powerful and it allows participants who are in physically separate locations, like their own individual rooms, to openly communicate with each other through their VR headsets. Of course, for us, staff can still lead and participate in the conversation by speaking directly through their own device too. So there's still that key facilitator and a staff member leading the conversation, which is what it's all about. We found pretty significant success in actually strengthening social connections through voice-based shared VR experiences, which again, I'll get into when I talk about some of the research. Virtual meeting spaces became incredibly popular throughout the pandemic. I don't have to explain that to anyone here, I'm sure. With VR, you're able to move beyond the 2D screen, beyond Zoom, and bring people together in authentically curated and designed spaces. Excuse me. Now, our team has a fair bit of experience here, having launched a social gathering VR app called Alcove alongside AARP with today over a few 100,000 users. And so we knew that we needed to deploy something specifically designed for the industry that we worked in. So we launched was the Connection Corner, which is essentially a virtual living room that allows residents to spend time together when they're not able to physically meet in communal spaces. Staff are able to customize avatars for each resident, same way you would for your own Oculus profile. And then residents come together, they sit in a circle of comfortable chairs, the same way we would in normal communities. And then staff are given conversational prompts that are available to engage the group in an engaging discussion. And what we see is that it actually can feel pretty natural and fun. And throughout the pandemic, it was really important, right? Creating and maintaining a sense of community has never been more empowering and necessary. And spaces like the Connection Corner did wonders in supporting the specific goal. And I believe even as we move forward, even as restrictions start to wind down, there's still an opportunity through these virtual meeting spaces to build communities that extend beyond the physical community. And I'll talk a little bit more about this soon. I want to quickly touch on Envision Home. This is our virtual reality platform that focuses on allowing sales and marketing teams to seamlessly run virtual tours with prospective families. Now, the brilliance of VR in this use case is that the building doesn't have to be spotless and organized with residents ushered around and kind of having their days disrupted at a moment's notice. In fact, the building doesn't even have to be built, right? Along with 360 images and videos, interior designers and senior living developers can work with us and upload their 3D renderings while the building's still in development and upfront a little bit of the sales process. Now, of course, this is beneficial for a number of people, but prospects benefit big time from the immersive elements of VR. And what they can do is they can envision their future home, hence the name, through this networked VR. And with the networking infrastructure that we've built, sales directors are actually able to see exactly where their prospects are looking in real time, allowing them to tailor their sales pitch to the elements that are most interesting for that specific prospect. Since physical distance is totally removed through VR, corporate groups can benefit doubly here by allowing prospects to tour multiple communities throughout their portfolio in a single sitting. It's more efficient for sales teams, it's more efficient for prospects, and back to the entire purpose of this topic, it's a necessary step in actually building communities, right? We have communities that are an all-time low occupancy right now, and we need to be doing work to build that occupancy back up because you need a strong roster of individuals to actually form the lifeblood of the community that you're working on. So that's honestly, it's a necessary part of when we talk about the future. And then within that same context, as we talk about community building, it's really important that we all remember that most residents of senior living, they have a community of people that exist before they move into a new building. Now, the best approach to make everyone feel comfortable before, during, and after that transition from a family perspective is to make sure there are powerful ways to stay connected. While that community can take many shapes, a big focus is, of course, the family. Not just the family member who lives around the corner from the community and is able to visit and check in frequently, but we also have to think about the wider family who may be dispersed all over the country, potentially even all over the world, and they're physically distant. Hopefully by now, right, we're hearing this physical distance and we're saying, yes, this is where VR really plays a role for this demographic. And that's exactly what we thought when we built out the Wendever Family Portal. We saw a lot of family members getting really excited about the fact that their community was using technology like VR, right? And they had grandparents using VR even before grandchildren were. And with that, we've actually seen communities host family nights that are centered around shared group trips using their Endeavor VR system. And we realized there was an opportunity to translate that excitement into something bigger. So what we did was we built the family platform. And one of the big things that you can do is you can actually use 360 cameras and you can craft really amazing experiences in 360 media. Now, of course, that's a pretty daunting task because some of the highest quality experiences that creators work on, right, have upwards of 17 cameras. But luckily with the work that GoPro has done and some other consumer grade cameras, there are cameras that are easy enough to use and that give a good enough experience. And what that means is that in today's day and age, anybody can go grab a camera and film something that's important to them. So for us, this translates to the understanding that family members can take their own 360 cameras and film important moments they cannot physically bring their older loved ones to. This means you can go get a family event like a wedding, a graduation ceremony, anything that's happening as a family unit, take a 360 camera, and the opportunity is to bring your loved one there no matter where they're physically stuck, right? So a resident never again has to miss the wedding of a granddaughter who lives across the country, but she can be there front row, sitting next to her family members, crying alongside them and joining in the fun. We think about senior living, it's a huge opportunity, right? It's a huge opportunity for the industry. It really shifts the way that we think about the moving out process because people are able to stay co-located. Now, when we think about reducing social isolation, of course, again, we need to include existing family relationships in our approach. And like all things, using this cutting edge technology with a demographic that's not necessarily has a ton of experience with technology like this, we knew we needed a data-driven approach to understanding what the opportunity was. So as a company, we went to work. And after a few years of grant applications and lots of study revisions, we were awarded a phase 1 grant from the National Institute on Aging here in the US to study what we're calling virtual family engagement. Now, that study kicked off in September 2019, and we set out to answer 2 questions. One, will this really work across the distance? Because most of our experience with this demographic to date had been in sharing experiences among groups who are seated right next to each other while they're wearing their headsets. And 2, will this work for those on the memory care spectrum? Depending on the experience, right, family members are either only present through voice or they're embodied by these 3D, by their 3D avatars, which is just abstract enough to potentially cause confusion and distress, especially for people with memory impairment. And so we needed to understand that this is something that could really, really work. After all, if the family member's virtual presence created any negative emotions, it probably wouldn't present an opportunity for any VR-based family engagement to really take shape in the industry. So our study design looked at each component of what was possible through our current implementation of family engagement. So then we considered our baseline to be a standard phone call between the resident and the family member. And then we kicked off weekly sessions that allowed them to experience VR together. The first session was what people typically think of with VR, right? They got to share in a session of 360 video experiences and they talked the whole way through each one. The second session required the family members to create a custom life story for their loved one by using our family portal. During that session, they went and they experienced each stop together and they shared in memories along the way, again, speaking to each other. For the final session, family members uploaded old family photos and family videos beforehand, again, using the Rendever family portal. And then during the session, they came together as avatars and they sat next to each other on a couch in our virtual family room. The photos and videos were shown up on a virtual TV, and they really just focused on enjoying themselves and recounting the memories and stories that naturally bubbled up as they were sharing. We didn't really know what to expect during the session, but I'll never forget being there for the first participant because they spent a full 90 minutes in that virtual family room, and the room was just, it was full of smiles, it was laughter, there were a few tears. It was pretty amazing and emotional to see, and we saw it replicated throughout the study. Now, unfortunately, we were unable to finish data collection before the pandemic hit, but the results were looking pretty spectacular. We saw high levels of user satisfaction and overall joy experienced while using VR technology, and the residents showed statistically significant increases in positive emotional affect and decreases in negative emotions over the course of the study, which is obviously enticing from a product perspective. We saw statistically significant increases in quality of life measures, which is a result that we've seen repeated through multiple studies. And again, it points to why this technology is starting to gain so much traction within this demographic and the industry that cares for this demographic. We were most excited about the impact of the dyadic relationship between the resident and the family member. After all, strong relationships are the best way to solve for social isolation. Over just 3 weekly VR sessions, the feelings of emotional closeness were significantly increased and feelings of isolation from the family member significantly decreased. Now, I want to emphasize that all of these, all of these results reached statistical significance, which is really exciting. We also saw dramatic improvements in feelings of satisfaction within the relationship, but we were just shy of reaching statistical significance with that one data set, but I'm hopeful for phase 2. Now, obviously here, the results are overall phenomenal, and we were lucky enough to be given the green light to fast track once the pandemic started and apply for a full-on phase 2 clinical trial. And that actually just started this past September. And what we're doing now is a multi-site study that we're looking to research the greater long-term effects. So definitely there's a lot to stay tuned for with news coming up here. And because I think this is one of the most exciting things happening, I want to show you what that virtual family engagement really looks like. So I'm going to play a video in the next slide, and you'll see a single resident who's enjoying her VR session. You'll hear researchers in the room with her, but you won't be able to see any of them. But I'm going to ask you to listen closely, as you're going to hear a few voices. One of them is very clearly the resident. One of them is one of the researchers who's in the background. And then one of them is the adult son of this resident who is engaging with her through the headset. Now pay attention to how she lights up and engages as she's being spoken with.
It didn't look like you.
Oh, now what do you see, Rosemary?
I see it. Oh, wow, looky here.
Yeah?
Hello.
Oh, here he comes.
Look, he's gonna come see me.
You're on a safari.
Can I touch him?
You can try. Oh, he's gonna give you a kiss. Be careful. Ooh!
Ooh. He's getting pretty close.
His kiss is gonna give you a kiss, Rosemary.
Oh, you're sweet. I like you. Come here. Come here. Come here. Come here. You got great big, whatever it
A
is.
snout, maybe. A snout.
Horns, I think.
Horns?
Yeah, big horns. Look at that.
He's a big, strong fella.
Yeah, he sure is. Yeah, I'm not gonna ride him. Looky here. Wow. Come here. Come here. Come closer.
You better be careful. Be careful. Don't want him getting too close to you.
Oh, I want him to get closer. Come here.
You want to pet a rhinoceros?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a cute one.
Wait, sorry. Now, hopefully you saw, you heard, you enjoyed all of that. This is a woman with a form of cognitive decline, actively engaging with someone who's not actually sitting next to her, which I think is pretty incredible. All right, I also want to take a moment to discuss one of the other things we find really exciting about VR within this demographic. And this is something that honestly we noticed in the early days. And I'll never forget the first time that I watched a fully wheelchair-bound man physically wake up and move his body for the first time in months. We were doing this demo at this community. It was actually the first community that we ever sold to. And there was a lot of hesitation about bringing this particular gentleman into the session, saying he wouldn't really move or engage with the program because he didn't really engage with any of the programs. When we put the headset on him, we were definitely kind of waiting there with bated breath. Even though it candidly took a few minutes, he eventually started to move his head as he followed along with the experience. And he got to the point where he wanted to place his hands on the arm of his wheelchair and reposition himself to follow along with something that was happening in the environment. Now, this form of physical engagement, it's enticing for a number of reasons. And we've seen communities since use VR as a tool during their physical therapy sessions and more broadly as a part of their physical wellness programming. Physical movement alone is something to be excited about, and it's worth building around. And there's a lot of opportunities here. And one of the big questions that we're asking ourselves as we look to the future is, what kind of programming really builds the most physical engagement? And for us, we believe there's a strong correlation between the actual level of physical engagement and experience and the overall enthusiasm that the participant has about the programming experience. So for this study, we decided to actually film each session, which obviously you just saw, and analyze the kinesthetic movements of the residents across each session, and specifically across each type of session. And what we found is trends that the experiences that were personalized to the resident through the family led to significantly more motor activation than the experiences that were more generic travel experiences or video-based experiences. And we found was that the actual highest level of engagement came from residents with dementia while they were revisiting favorite places from their past. And this is a strong data point that supports the power of reminiscence therapy. And we're excited to see how this, again, continues to play out as we go into phase 2. I'm going to play one more video. There's no audio here, so I'll just kind of talk over it a little bit. So what you're seeing here is that her limbs are coded and they're mapped to a kinesthetic skeleton. I mean, you should be able to see every limb is mapped, her spine is mapped, even every single finger. Now, as the experience happens, because it's immersive, it's exciting for her, the participant is moving around and engaging with what is happening within the headset, right? You see her arms raise high in the air, the hands lift up. And as she points up with one of her arms, or she lifts her hand high to touch the virtual giraffe that's in front of her, the entire skeletal body recognizes that movement. And she'll frequently bring her hands up to her face, and she'll turn and she'll reach out in the other direction. And you'll see that same skeletal body shift and translate. Now, with this information, we were able to actually quantify the kinesic engagement across time and across experience. And it gave us the ability to understand how each experience evokes different levels of that physical engagement. Of course, we even have the ability to kind of cut and analyze it on the level of an individual limb. So some of the questions that we can ask ourselves is there a difference between a resident's right arm or left arm, which could be really interesting data as we look to those who are recovering from stroke. What happens when we have a visually engaging experience happening on the right-hand side of somebody who is facing challenges with right side mobility due to a stroke? We are also able to quantify and look at the entire trunk activation, which is clearly the highest magnitude movement. And it's something to be really excited about for those who have ever been wheelchair bound or wheelchair bound for a long period of time, like the gentleman that I was just talking about. We can also focus on lower limb movement, which you see right now, to understand some of the structural stability. Hopefully you see that she's kind of constantly shuffling the positioning of her feet and hips to allow her to more fully engage with the immersive 360 experience. One of the best parts about this social VR, when multiple people are experiencing the same thing at the same time, like with her son, and who's communicating via that headset, somebody will notice something that's happening and they'll call out, look to the left, and everybody else is naturally inclined to then look to the left. So what we see time and time again, analyzing this concept, is this concept of what we're calling motivated movement. And this data is starting to come together in a really, really nice way. And there's a lot that we're kind of excited to work on and continue here. And what this supports is it supports an understanding and belief that as we work on demographics where there's an opportunity to impact them, the opportunity for individualized programming, it's really going to be the best way to engage with individuals, especially individuals who are facing these kind of limitations in their kind of quality of life. So there's a lot of work that we're doing here, and there's a lot that's coming. And I think as we look to the senior living industry, this is something that's really exciting for the industry, right? The physical component, it's a big opportunity, and we're excited to collect more data as we enter phase 2. And yeah, there's a number of things that I could kind of point out. We do have something that's just getting started, which I'll share a little bit about. I know I'm running out of time here. So finally, let me talk about 2 things that we're working on that are also kind of building a lot of wellness and well-being, especially as we're facing this new form of lifestyle. One of the most important things as we think about the implementation of VR technology is how it can be integrated with kind of daily life and how you can utilize multiple interfaces, right? Not everybody is going to respond really positively to VR. And for us, that shouldn't actually exclude them from being a part of an immersive VR session. So what we did during the pandemic was we launched something called Rendeavor Live, and we then later on launched a web accessible version of Rendeavor Live, in which what we were seeing was within this industry, there were a ton of limitations and challenges that staff were facing, right? Staff were burdened more than ever. They were running around trying to do one-on-one programs. They were having a hard time, and we've seen staff attrition rates that are at an all-time high even today. That's something that's really a challenge for the industry. And what we were able to do at Rendeavor is we're able to kind of take our networking approach to using this technology, take everybody who's on this micro network level at their individual building and bring them into a macro network in which we're able to actually deliver live programming that goes and gets broadcast to the hundreds and hundreds of communities that we work with across the world, which means that at this point, every single day, we are leading live sessions broadcast in VR to communities in California, to communities in Australia, to communities in Toronto. And actually, one of my favorite experiences that we've done is we do a weekly live trivia session. And every single week, we see a community up in Toronto and a community out in California who show up. They're 2 of our power users. They show up week to week, and they go head to head to see who can be the trivia champion of that week. And why I want to point that out is, again, like, what we see is the overall opportunity through VR. It's building a place in which shared positive experiences can really promote and create community. And while we've seen a ton of anecdotal and scientific evidence that works within communities, we're really at this new age of looking at how it can impact people who are physically very, very distant. And to see, we have like 20 residents who are showing up from Toronto and 20 residents from California literally every single week, who are starting to know each other by name and like kind of like nudge each other as they compete. This is the future, right? And this is the future that VR is empowering. Now, again, there's a lot that's happening here. There's a lot that I can talk about. I want to open up the floor for conversations, but what I hope that you're able to take away from this entire session, through this technology, through VR, the industry that supports seniors, we have this amazing opportunity to really build a sense of a truly thriving community. And that happens both within the buildings and really across the entire industry, again, across continents, across countries. And with its ability, naturally, to just defy physical space and physical distance, VR offers something it's unique and it's irreplaceable when it comes to fueling connection and building authentic relationships. And the data is proving it, right? This is not a scientific future. This is not a Black Mirror episode of San Junipero. This is something that's actively happening. I did want to riff really quickly on Rendeavor Fit, which is a new fitness platform that we launched, but does not seem to be here. But I will say that one of the things, again, that we've noticed through this motivated movement is that seniors are engaging, and we're seeing physical improvements along with the mental well-being changes that we're seeing through reduction in social isolation. And we just recently announced a new fitness platform that combines social, physical, and cognitive engagement into one platform built specifically for this demographic. And the demonstrations so far, the experiences have been incredible. So if you're interested in learning more, I encourage you to please check out the Rendeavor website, check out our LinkedIn profile. There's some pretty cool videos. And with that, I will say thank you. I hope that you're all walking away excited. I hope you see the power of this technology and its potential within this demographic that we might not typically think of. I've seen it personally impact countless individuals, and the stories that we hear every single day are something that motivates me on a daily basis. And it's an absolute pleasure to be serving at the intersection of these two incredibly growing, shifting industries. So with that, I will wrap my presentation and I will turn the floor over to questions if there are any.
Well, Kyle, thank you for your very interesting presentation. It's great to see that you move into a market that I think is going to grow only bigger because of basically aging and this population is growing. I don't see any questions from the audience currently, which is not a problem because I have a question for you.
Okay.
When you put on a headset for the first time on one of these elderly people, are they kind of hesitant in using it, or do they really dive in just like children do, basically?
Yeah, that's a great question. What we tend to see is that there are, again, because we work primarily in senior living communities, and what we tend to see is there's always a group of people within the community that are eager to try something, right? If you bring something in new, they're going to look at that and be like, I want to try that. I want to see what happens. And the moment that someone in the community puts on a headset and you see this immediate smile come across their face and you see them start to interact and like bring out this joy, right? Everybody else kind of looks at that and they're like, well, what exactly is that I want to try? And that's when people start to line up and they get really excited about it. And I'll say that same experience happens if you just go to a loved one at home. I'll never forget when I brought my first Rendeavor system to my grandfather. He is 92 years old. And he lives in Long Island, New York. We brought the VR system. I did some experiences with my father, with my mother, and they were having a great time. And my grandpa naturally just peeked up. I was like, well, what's all the fuss about? Like, I want to try it, which was obviously what we wanted him to say. And then we were up until, I kid you not, 2 a.m, doing these VR experiences. And, he really loved some of the like bucket list style experiences, but what we spent a vast majority of the time doing was walking around the streets of Long Island, which is actually really funny because he still to this day lives in Long Island in New York, right? But he wanted to the ability to just quickly pop over to places from his childhood and sit there and just relive and recount some of the memories. It was incredibly tangible. And, I'll never forget, like, obviously he was having a great time, but my mom at one point whipped out her cell phone and turned on the voice recording and was like, we need to capture this. Like, I've never heard these stories before, and they're just like flowing out of him. And so we have a full voice recording of him going until 2 a.m. talking about some of the experiences from his early life. And like that opportunity, like it's impossible not to be inspired by it and bring it to more people.
Yeah. Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, I can imagine working in the same industry as you are, but not especially with elderly people. We work with a lot of other basically business organizations as well, and we use VR a fair amount of time. And I can relate to that, but especially with elderly people, and especially in the range of dementia, I can imagine that they are more open because they don't have all these barriers. So I want to thank you for this great talk. I'm going to close the stream now. Thank you again, and hope to see you soon.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
All right.